Good evening, everyone. My name is Andre Miguel. I'm your anchor for tonight. It's great to be back. This is the RFC Tuesday podcast, Season 8. I'm a registered financial consultant and also I'm a senior wealth manager. So everyone, welcome to Season 8, Episode 3 of the RFC Tuesday podcast. But of course, before we start, let's thank the IARFC PH, the Philippine chapter of the International Association of the Registered Financial Consultants, for putting this podcast together. The IARFC PH is an association dedicated to the craft of financial consulting and is the sole organization authorized to conduct the RFC conversion courses as well as continuing education in the field of financial consulting. Season 8 is our international series in partnership with IARFC Home Office and of course, the superb support of the IARFC Public Relations Officer, Ms. Susan Kappa. Hi, Susan. It's great to see you again. And of course, Season 8, Episode 3, our topic for tonight is building rapport with your client. Now, this is actually a very important foundational skill that you need to build if you want to have a long and lasting relationship with your client. And of course, there's no better specialist to talk about building rapport than our special guest for tonight. So Paul is an entrepreneurial leader in financial services with over 35 years of professional consulting and practice management services that, he basically helps maximize revenue growth. He also has a proven track record of increasing annual sales, exceeding company goals, and developing client relationships. And he is highly skilled at delivering motivational and influential presentations across a variety of audiences. And he's a trusted partner for sales coaching, management, business development to RIAs, broker-dealers, independent, and of course, large financial institutions. And of course, he's also a member on the IARFC US Chapter Board of Directors. And he is the chair of the IARFC Financial Forum Committee. So join me in welcoming Mr. Paul Wharf, Senior Financial Services Leader and a registered financial consultant. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Andre. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
And we're also very happy to have you. So, let's get down, straight to the show. And we'd like to know more about your story, your personal history. Could you tell us a bit about your background, your story, and how you got to be the leader you are now?
Sure. As you indicated, I started about 35 years ago at an operations job, actually in the legal end of financial services. But I got my start as a intern with my grandfather's financial advisor. So I wasn't sure, obviously, when I was in college, really what I wanted to do. So he was kind enough to bring me under his wing and kind of show me the business back in the late 80s. And I hate to date myself, but it is true. And that was obviously a tumultuous period within the market. So I got to learn a lot about client relationships and behavior and how to work with clients during, not just the good times, but also the very tumultuous, difficult times in the marketplace. So that's really where it launched and what attracted me to this is every day is different. And what you bring to the table is really important to the person on the other side of the desk. And to me, that's something that, I knew I wasn't going to be a doctor. That was kind of out of it. I definitely didn't want to be a lawyer at that point, even though that did venture into my mind. But this was sort of a way for me to also be what I call a trusted advisor to a client and looked at as equal of both the physician and the lawyer, someone who the people turn to in order for advice and to help them navigate a certain situation.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. You actually equate, us financial consultants as someone equal to physicians and lawyers, because of course, right, the advice that we provide can have a dramatic or a major impact on someone's life, right?
Yes.
All right, so
yeah, it does absolutely.
Great. Yeah, I totally agree. So, I want to talk more about, your how we introduced you earlier. You're an entrepreneurial leader in financial services. Could you could you explain or give, provide more context on what exactly do you mean by being an entrepreneurial leader in financial
Sure.
services?
Absolutely. I think we all are in this business, right? But we don't put ourselves at we don't look at ourselves that way. And when I talk about an entrepreneurial leader, I always refer to a quote that Henry Ford said, right? If there's a better way, find it. I've kind of taken that quote and changed it and say, if there's a better way, find it and then do it. Because so many people in our business and anywhere, what they'll do is they will find or see an opportunity or find or see a way to do things better, but they'll never act on it. They'll hold back or they'll wait for someone else to do it, right? They'll become part of the herd and not actually lead the sheep, in other words. So I'm a big proponent of thinking outside the box, right? Don't look at something just the way it is. Look at it as how it could be and what could make it better. And that's almost in everyday life you can do that with your practice. So that's what I mean by entrepreneurial leader is you're doing things that are outside the box and not status quo to what the industry or the profession has dictated.
Yeah, those are great points, especially the part about doing. It's funny because we
Yeah.
call it practice management, right? So it definitely means that we have to actually practice what we preach.
Yeah. It's true. And physicians, they have a practice, right?
Mhm.
What this is what my practice looks like. And the funny joke is, well, if you always practice, when do you finally get good at it, right? But the point is you've got to keep practicing in order to be good at it, right? Great golfers practice, great football players, great, basketball players, they all practice to get better. And we are no different, no matter what we are in this industry.
Yeah, this is actually those are great points, and I'm sure to build rapport, we're gonna need to have a lot of practice.
If you will.
All right, so could you tell us more about, you know, with your proven track record in sales, how do you stay motivated to actually hit or even exceed your goals?
It's not easy, right? It's always an improvement month over month. I look at right as I'm never comfortable with the situation, right? I always want to again go back to that quote. How do I make it better? Um, that to me is something that's very important about being motivated and moving it, right? If we just create a complacency, right, or coast, right? I always hear some advisors say, well, my practice is pretty self sufficient. It takes care of itself, right? Which operational wise, that's great. But the point of when you get to a level of saying it takes care of itself and it's just living off of itself, that's the part that someone else is going to come along and disrupt your practice, right? Or a client may leave, right? That may be a point that's what wakes people up is when maybe someone else disrupts your practice and not when you do it. I would much rather have control of disrupting my practice by making it better and moving it forward than having someone else dictate that to me so I have to move forward. So that keeps me motivated to always improve and never be complacent. I read a lot of behavior and psychology books and guides. What those do is it makes me take some of those learnings and then implement small pieces of it, right? It's you can't change your practice or change your methodology or change your thought process overnight. It has to be done as in incremental steps.
You know, those are very great points. And going back to what you mentioned earlier about people coasting, it sort of makes sense because there's some business models, right, where they actually generate fees from AUM, and then once they reach a certain point, they lose that hunger. And what you said earlier about, staying motivated, how to stay motivated, that's actually very important, right? So now bringing this, everything you've said so far, we're bringing this to the practice of building or the effort, the whole thing where we build rapport with our clients. So
Uh,
could you tell us or at least give us an idea how you actually start that process, right, to build the rapport with a client?
Sure, it's something. It's an adage that's still used today, right? We're
Hmm.
born with two ears and one mouth. However, we use them in an opposite fashion. And we as salespeople or advisors, we love to hear ourselves talk, right? We love to prove how smart we are to the client because we think that's going to impress them. What's really smart is listening to the client and finding what I call is the need behind the need, right? People will tell you when you ask them a question, the reasoning behind that question, right? Well, why do you want to save, for retirement? Well, we want to live better. Oh, okay, we want to live better. And most people stop at that point. Well, why do you want to live better? What do you want to do that's better, right? What you really need to start digging down to find out what I call the need behind the need. And when you find that is when the client really can't come up with another reason, right? If you ask, well, tell me more about what you mean about living well in retirement. What does that mean to you? How do you see that in the retirement stage? What are things that you want to do? Those things are getting into the granular part of it is building rapport. And that starts to what you want the client to do. And think of it this way. You want the client to leave that meeting feeling like they've never had a meeting like that before. That you asked them the questions that no one else asked them before. You really went to the root of the problem or the issue or their concern. And when you start doing that, not just one time, but every single time you meet the client, and I don't mean you have to keep diving down with 100 questions, even if you move the dial slightly in every meeting to be very empathetic and very focused on what the need is behind the need, that's going to let them leave that meeting feeling like they've gotten more out of your meeting than they have anybody else. And again, I think you heard me use the trusted advisor phrase. That's how I think of our profession, and not just our profession, but in the United States, certified public accountants are the most trusted individuals for clients. They do one simple function, right? And it's not that simple, but they do one function, and they're thought of as someone who's very, very ethical in standards, and they are someone who the client really looks towards for advice. We need to be equal to that trusted advisor, both an attorney and a CPA and a physician. All of them, we are in the same plane that they are. We just need to really keep moving the conversation in the same way they do. So that's what that's how, for me, it's building rapport is you really need to start digging deeper and not coming to the table with an agenda. Your agenda, right? I mean, you may say, I'm going to talk to my client about this. If a meeting starts that way, you're already off on the wrong foot, in my opinion. The client is the one that dictates the progression of the meeting, not really you. You're the one there to solve the problem, not to create the problem.
Yeah, those are actually the whole thing that you just said is very profound. It made me it reminded me of some experiences, right? Like, in the early days, you're young and you're still new in sales or in financial services. You're thinking, okay, I'm going to push this product, I'm going to sell this. But when you actually take a different approach, right, taking it from the client's perspective, actually talking to them about what they actually need, right? And like you said, like the question behind the question, you just keep asking, going deeper and deeper. And when you find the root cause, you're actually doing something different. You're not just trying to push some product now. You're actually helping them figure out not just for their finances, but what actually matters to them, right? And I think that's one amazing, great way to build, a long-lasting relationship.
Yeah, yeah. I had a mentor, if you would, teach me the fact that they would do their introduction meeting or even their quarterly meeting, and they would never present a solution during that meeting. They would always think about it, put a plan together based upon the conversation that they had, use the client's same verbiage in the next meeting, right? Or to end that meeting, say, so in other words, what you've told me is this is important, and this is what you'd like as the outcome. Let me work on that, and I'll come back in a week or two, and we'll have another discussion, whether it's now video or in person, and we'll talk about possible solutions. And by doing that, you are showing a higher level of empathy towards what their real need is, and not just throwing a solution that's thought of in a few minutes at the prospect or at the client. You're being truly attached to that solution to the client's needs and giving it time. And people respect that. They don't want a quick fix. They want you to think about really how can you help them solve a problem. They want you to know that you understand it, but they don't necessarily need the quick fix in that meeting. And that builds rapport even more.
Yeah, I think that's a great point because the fact that you also like give it enough time, a week or so or more, even more, give the client enough time to digest the whole thing, right? Because like like to us when we're talking about financial services and financial planning, because we do this on a daily basis, it's a lot. It's the language is just there. We just get it. But for the layperson, it's completely alien, and giving them enough time to think about it and then asking them in, like you said, in their verbiage, you actually help them, right, get to that. And I think
Yeah.
those are amazing points.
Yeah.
All right, so aside from let's try to go to the actual methods, right? So could you share or discuss your methods to actually gain rapport with your clients?
Sure. Yeah. I was fortunate enough to work under Dr. Marvin Sadovsky. He's an older gentleman now, but he's a linguistic psychologist who wrote a book called Sell the Way Your Customer Buys. I get no payment for saying that. So it is an unbelievable book that I probably read every year because there's so many nuggets in it. And really, if you think of sales is not much different than psychology, right? It's understanding the client. It's finding a solution for the client and then presenting to the client in a way that they understand exactly what you just said. But really finding out what connects a client and makes them to buy, if you want to use that word, right? Or move forward with your idea, is finding out how they think. And what usually happens is we have a process that we do in meetings. We'll say, I'll show up, I'll introduce the team, I'll introduce myself, my history, and then I'll go into a presentation of our firm, and then I'll go into a presentation of what we can do and all the bells and whistles we can provide. So far, for the first half an hour of the meeting, we've talked only about ourselves, right? We've not, and the way we've done it is we have done it in a way that we like, not in the way that the clients actually absorb. So one way to look at it is when you look at a client or look at a current client, a prospect, however you want to do it, you want to find out what makes them motivated to move forward. Are they a visual client, right? Are they an auditory client, right? Are they a kinesthetic? They use the words, I feel like, or the last advisor I had, I felt this way. That's kinesthetic. Or auditory. Tell me more about what you do, or show me what you guys do. I mean, do you have a presentation I can see? Those are all huge rapport building signals that 90% of the advisors or people, no matter what sales it is, let skate right over the top of our heads and we don't even acknowledge it. And those are huge nuggets of information of how you should present to the client. That's the first. And then the way that they talk about it, are they someone who's very process driven, right? Are they like an engineer or a CPA that they talk about processes, right? We always talk, why can't I build a relationship with CPA or certified public accountants? Well, because we come at it as all the options as salespeople, because we have to be on our toes to be able to be options driven. They are very procedural type of behavior, and they want to talk about bucket A, bucket B, bucket C. So we're coming at it all wrong, right? Coming at it completely all wrong. Now, if we talk to in the United States, we talk to divorce attorneys, they love us because we are very options driven, just the way that they are options driven. So you have to really think of what the client's buying signals across the table really are. And that is something that you hone every single day. That is a process that you don't pick up on right away, but you really have to hone the skill and you have to work at it and you have to listen for those things, because those are the things that are going to tell you how to present. Because someone takes a presentation, looks at it, and then passes it, pushes it off the side of the table, and then talks to you, and then you reach over and you put it back in front of them to show them, you were doing you're doing it wrong, right? You were doing it all wrong. So take the presentation, don't ever use it again, make a note in the client's file. Client is not a visual client. We will not use presentations or graphs to them. That's the way that I think you start to take building rapport to a much higher level than just asking certain questions and then staying in front of the class. Some people say, well, I build rapport by I save, which I think is important. I remember all the important dates for them. I think that's very, very important because that makes people feel that you've listened, you care enough to be able to remember. Exactly the same reason why I said, remember the reasons why they told you what their needs are and write it down. And then when you come back to speak to them, use those same words because they're going to say, think of it. If you met someone today and then 3 weeks later, they come back and say, oh, you're the one that has X or Y or Z. You're going to be like, you actually listen to me. That's pretty good. You've built rapport just by doing that, by using the same verbiage or bullet points that they've told you. You've helped them and you've built rapport all in one. So those are high level, really deep rapport building things to work on. But I can't stress enough. Again, I get no financial backing from Marvin's book. He's a guru. Plus, there's plenty others that focus on linguistic psychology and behavior. Right? It's really we ended up turning it into a behavioral finance. Right? Is what we called it in our side of the business. It's really the same thing. It's just we threw a nicer word on it than linguistics because most people don't know what that means. And I didn't either. So that's a first place I would start with building rapport. And it's very, very high level, no question. But it's one that will build instantaneous rapport if you practice and hone those skills.
You're definitely speaking the truth, man. In my day-to-day practice, when you talk and meet these different kinds of people, there are some people who are like very direct communicators, like, oh, do this. They're domineering or, they're dominant personality, right? But like you said about those CPAs or engineers, they really want to get down into the details. Like, oh, like, how did you make this estimate? Or this forecast is based on what, right? They're, the verbiage or how they think or how they speak. It's a great reflection on who they are. And
Yep.
It's basically being an active listener, right? And then asking these questions to actually deepen the relationship. But since we're throwing the ball to their court, right? Like most of this is direct, driven from their perspective, from their side. Sure. What are some of the pitfalls in this approach, and how can we avoid them?
Some of the pitfalls are us coming to the table, with our own agenda, right? That's the biggest pitfall I see is we come in with an agenda of here's what we're going to talk about and here's how I do things. And the problem with that is now it's all about you, right? It's not about the client. Remember, it's their meeting, right? Let them tell you what's important to them. And they really don't care how many letters you have after your name. They don't care how many, universities you've gone to or what level you've gone. That never comes up in a conversation. They'll look on your wall and see the certifications and say, okay, this person has done their due diligence and they are successful at what they do. However, that doesn't mean that you run the meeting, right? You run it as far as giving them guidelines of what you need, but it's their meeting. It's not your meeting. You give them the guidelines, tell them how the process works, and then really find out what's important is what they need, right? And not what you need. That's the biggest part of it. And look at the big picture with a client, right? Many clients get stuck in the mud with certain things. Like I really need to focus on getting bigger income when I retire. Well, that's great. I understand that. That's one bucket. And we'll put a little bucket on a whiteboard or on the chart for that. That's one bucket. But let's say something happens where medically something happens and you don't get to that retirement. Have you addressed that? No, I haven't even thought about that. Okay, then we'll put that as another bucket. Have you looked at it about, your children? Have you done? So you sort of break down the bigger picture and show them the bigger picture, but break it down into things that they don't or haven't thought of. They come in with a specific agenda. And I don't mean push that aside. You focus on that and say, we always come back to that and say, Now, you came in here about retirement, but I'm glad we talked about the other things because those are things we can build upon as time goes on and as we hopefully build a relationship. But let's start addressing what you came in for. So don't dismiss it, but also let them know that you're not here just to solve the one problem, right? You're to look at it. And let me give you an example. If you have your primary physician, and again, this is in the U.S., we go in and say, I got a backache. All right, let's address the backache. That's something that's important. But what we also should do is, have you had a blood test, right? What's your blood pressure lately? Have you felt dizzy? They ask more questions to see if there's other systemic things that are the issue. They still address the back problem, but they also find out what might be under the hood, if you would, to find out if there's other problems. And that's really what we need to do as a true trusted advisor, is not just focus on the one issue because they get stuck in the mud. Make sure that you open up the umbrella and show them all the things that you're there to help solve. And the last part I always do, and we do it in the beginning. I mean, you talked about when we started. I always made a joke that if a person fogged up a mirror, they could be a client, right? We had no criteria to put in and as our careers moved, we changed the criteria, right? We said, I will only take people with, $500,000 or $1 million or $1 billion, whatever the number may be. And we changed that based upon what we thought our worth was, right? Unfortunately, I mean, I think you should start out that way in the beginning, but you have to earn your stripes, as we call it here. But don't let clients run your practice, right? And I always keep referring back to attorneys and CPAs because, again, I think we're in the same realm of what they provide. Even though in the US, the industry, the population necessarily doesn't put us in that category based on studies. I think they should, but I think that's our own demise that we've done that. Don't let the client run your practice, meaning if they come and say, listen, I'm going to come in today and I want to see you. They're a big client, so I better see them, right? Now, if you've got an agenda, don't disrupt the rest of your practice with moving people around just because your biggest client needs to come in. Sometimes they actually like it if you say, I'd love to see you today. I can talk with you for 5 or 10 minutes, but I've got a full agenda today. I've got a client list that I have to see, that I'm committed to. This is why I always say, let's put it on a reoccurring basis for my bigger clients. Let's see every month. Let's talk every month, even if it's just to catch up for a minute or two. It's well worth it. And if you have to cancel, you cancel. But let's put it on a reoccurring basis in our calendar. Giving them kind of a standoff approach of saying, listen, my practice is important, my other clients are important. You would never walk into a doctor, right? Doctor's office, your primary doctor, the hospital, yes, but primary doctor, say, I have to see you. They say, well, we can't, we're busy today, we're full, but we can put you on a calendar. In the United States, the calendar is about 7 months out to see a physician. Same thing with an attorney. You can't walk into an attorney's office and sit down and say, yeah, I have to see the attorney. Good ones, right? Good ones will say you have to book an appointment. And I want you to think of yourself that way because I think that's important. Once we start letting the client dictate our practice, that's when we lose control of our practice.
Yeah. The fact that you mentioned control means that even if we're throwing the ball on their court, we're still guiding them towards a certain direction. Now, the thing here is, let's say we're approaching this from someone who's never encountered this process, this method. How do we go about building that, right? Because, let's say you're going to guide the client, but, how do we actually have this procedure process that we can actually do this for our clients?
So the process, and if I'm understanding you correctly, how do we build a system in order to help the client move down the path, right? Or move to their goal, right? Is that what you're saying?
We're trying to be asking, we're trying to build rapport, asking them questions, but at the same time, we're not relinquishing control, right? So how can we do that, right? Like, let's say in my case, my approach in my practice is different because this is I think this is great because I get to learn about actually how to do this, but the real issue is how, right? Like, okay, you told me, okay, we want to ask questions upon questions to get to the root, but at the same time, we're still guiding the conversation. So how? Like, is there a template, a guide where we can, that's like our building block or our initial script. How do we do that? How do we create that?
Sure. Yeah, I think, I mean, I started with Marvin's book and finding
Hmm.
out, the first step is finding out what type of person this is, right?
Right.
How do I address this client to be able to move that conversation, right? So I have to uncover, are you an options person? Are you a procedural person, right? Are you visual? Do you talk about, listen, I want to see how you can help me grow my assets, right? So now I know, okay, you're a visual. So I need to find those little nuggets. That's the first part of it, because that's going to help me then ask the questions the right way, right? So in other words, if they say, show me, how you would solve this problem for me. Then you can refer to documents and say, okay, let me walk you through our process, right? And here's what we do. And you use a presentation. Here's who we are as a firm. Here's the questions we're going to ask with our financial plan in order to uncover not just the needs you came in with, but the needs that we think we can help you solve along the way. Because this isn't a one-time relationship, right? This is one that we want you to be a partner with us in our practice for a long time. And not only you, but your spouse and your children. That's important to us. Okay. We want to be here for a long time. We've set up our practice, so we're here for a long time. And we want you as a client for a long time. So our conversations will travel down that road. So having that financial plan will help you navigate those questions. And as long as you're using the same verbiage that they can, digest,
Right.
and whether it's showing, whether it's auditory, then you're moving the ball down the court. I think a financial plan is the most important thing to do for an individual because it keeps both of you on track and it checks off a lot of the boxes. Now, some people might not need certain things. Right? Some people may not need long-term care, they may not want it, right? That's just the end of it. Some people say, listen, I don't like insurance. I'm not doing insurance. All right, that's fine. You check that box off. 9 times out of 10, what happens is if you keep going down the path, they're going to realize they need insurance after a while and be like, something, yeah, you're right. I did need insurance. I just didn't need it at that time that you brought it up. So your plan is really the dictator of it, but understanding how the customer buys and then understanding the plan that you want to use, whichever one that is, and then implementing pieces of that plan is really the progression in building the rapport. Because as you check those boxes off, the ones that they actually come to see you for and the ones that they didn't come to see you for, that's when the rapport starts building. And finding the ones that they didn't realize they need is very, very important. Very important, right? Let's go back to the physician again. You go in, you have a bad back. That's great. By the way, I'm noticing your blood pressure's high. Oh, all right. What I think we should do is do a blood test, do this, do that, see really what the root of it is, and then maybe come up with a plan. What do you say? You say, well, I went to after you left the doctor. Well, that was great. I'm glad they fixed my back, but I'm really glad they found I had my blood pressure was high, right? That's moving the progression forward and then checking a box off that they didn't really realize they needed to be checked. I hope that answers your question.
Yep, definitely. So it's really just about building relationships ultimately, right?
That's all it is.
And
yeah, that's
having,
it. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And
It's
then,
not that hard, really. Yeah, we make it harder than it is.
yeah, but yeah, ultimately, it's really just getting to know the person, building a relationship with them, and also showing that we care, of course, and having, the financial plan as the guide so that, we can uncover more and more about our clients, and at the same time, see where's the gap, and then fill that gap with, the advisory and the like. But the thing is, how sometimes like we are going through the motions, like having these recurring meetings. How do we maintain that rapport where it doesn't get dull? How do we do that?
Yeah. One of the things that I think is important, I'll go back to sort of our beginning of the conversation where I said some things are important, but there's others that are more important. Checking in with clients is very important, right? Clients want to feel that they are thought of, right? And remembering those dates, as I talked about before, those are important, right? I mean, I remember when I started in the business, we used a CRM, contact management system. And, the first time that it had birth dates in there, right, that we refer to, right, that wasn't part of the legal part of it. We thought it was great because we could send out birthday cards or anniversary cards to them. And that was such a rapport builder with clients. Those are still in effect. That still hasn't changed. Client emotions haven't changed from that. I think it's important. The problem now is it's so automated that they are somewhat generic. So, I mean, I'm sort of old fashioned. I still write mine. Many people just print them off and mail them off, and it's kind of generic. But things like that are, dates, events, birth dates, grandchildren, right? Congratulations on your recent birth of your grandchild. Those are still very, very important to maintain the rapport. Continuing to ask questions or think of things that you haven't had a discussion about is important. Believe it or not, but I'm even one that my family's a construction. They come from construction. They've built homes. I am one to ask a home personal question, right, to people. So how's everything? How's the house going? Is what I'm really doing is they're like, oh, he's asking about the house. Are we moving? I find out if they're moving or not. Then I think there may be an influx of cash into the thing. Oh no, we've actually, we've had a flood in the basement. Now I'm thinking, okay, there's probably going to be either insurance that they're going to have to do a claim with, and I can help them with their insurance provider, or it's going to be a costly bill, and now we're going to have to look at the portfolio and see if there has to be adjustment. But I'm asking more than just the financial aspect of it. I'm asking about their lives. I'm asking about them. You want to keep the conversation moving, not just about financial situation, but also about that individual, especially if they're your larger 20% client, right? Your top 20%. Those are the ones you want to get into the weeds with. Now, they may not want you to be there. You don't stop at that, right? They put up a guard sometimes because they don't want you asking those questions, or it's uncomfortable for them. I'm a big fan of getting past being uncomfortable, right? I don't like being uncomfortable, but I like being in a situation that I'm uncomfortable because now I know I've broadened that horizon. And whether they're wealthy or not, they're the same type of individual that they also like that. So keep moving the conversation forward, whether it's financial or not, I think is a way to build rapport, build a relationship that's not only just with you, but long lasting with their generations, be after them.
Yeah, ultimately, in the end, it's really about the client, right? And keeping it about them, making it about them, and of course, it also helps that we have to be interested in others to actually keep this up.
Yeah.
Right?
If you don't like people, this is not the business, Andre. If you do not like people.
I learned so much, from the whole conversation. So, how do we bring this learning about client relationships, learning about building rapport to actually developing client relationships?
Yeah. So there's two sides to sort of learning about it, right? One is I can learn about it through workshops, through books, because you always want to keep learning about ways to build relationships with clients, right? Or ways to progress your practice, right? That's important for us to always keep that ball moving. So I'm a big fan of attending these webinars, attending, conferences and reading books on it. That to me is part where when I do that, I try to walk away with one nugget piece that I can use. So I'll write a bunch of them down and say, okay, which one do I think I can implement right away? It's sort of like going to the gym, right, Andre? It's like going to the gym. You're like, all right, I got a membership now. This is great. I can go to it. There's a lot of equipment here. I can't learn it all at once, but if I learn one piece of equipment each week or each month that I really focus on, I'm going to get better at it. And there's no difference with the sales processes. When you look at a book or a workshop, try to grab what I call self-help session. Grab one nugget that you can implement right away, and then categorize all these nuggets that you wrote down and say, okay, this is one I can do right away. And then this is the one that's probably going to take me the longest, the one on the bottom, but slowly work through that, right? And then when you grab that nugget, start implementing it right away into your client visits, right? Whether it's your client's calls, your quarterly meetings, whatever that may be, start implementing it into it. And in their notes, or even a separate note, right? I have a self-guidance notebook that I talk about, okay, with Mrs. Smith, I focused on this one nugget that I wanted to achieve. And now I keep moving that ball down the court. So it's taking what I've learned and collaborating it with my day-to-day, right? So think of it this way. It's a lot like being a cook or a chef, right? I have a recipe that I already know. This is a proven recipe that people say it works. But sometimes you need to change the recipe slightly to a certain taste or a certain flavor that you like, whatever it may be, to make it your own. And that's no different with learning self-help or another nugget from somebody else. I'm a big proponent of actually sitting with another advisor during their client reviews. I'm here to learn. I want to learn. I want to learn what's important to clients. I want to learn how another advisor does it. And I always think that that's important to be able to learn in the actual client environment as well, not just in a conference room or a book or something like that. It's always good to learn on the job, as we call
it. Yeah, being not just being interested in people, but being a lifelong student, right? That makes a difference. In not only do we improve our processes and approach, but the more we know, the more we can actually also give advice to others, right?
Yeah, Andre. One of the things I'll touch on with this, and I'm
sure.
I'm a big golfer, is Tiger Woods or DeChambeau, any of them. None of them stop practicing or trying to improve their craft. None of them. They do it on a daily basis. Tiger Woods hits 3,000 golf balls a day, right? Or used to.
Right.
Or he sits in a sand trap for 2 hours and works on hitting out of a sand trap. It's always improving. We should treat ourselves no differently than them, right? We should always try to improve our craft and to make it better and to make us better individuals, because it just doesn't drip into our work life. It starts to drip into our personal life as well. And it really makes a difference if we keep moving the ball down the court.
Oh yeah. Talking about sports and these amazing athletes, it reminds me of Michael Jordan, right? Like the guy became the best because he kept, shooting those hoops and practicing and doing it again and again on a daily basis. Yeah. I guess that's the difference, right? Really practice. Yeah. So, a thought just came to me, like how do we balance, the need to make a living? We're in sales, we have to sell. How do we balance that while also serving our clients and going to the, like actually getting to the root, right? How do we balance it, right? Like, oh, you have a sales target, or you need to sell, or you don't eat.
Yeah, it's, believe it or not, is if you take care, it's always funny. We hear people that are very successful and they're like, well, if you take care of the client, the rest will take care of themselves, right? And in the moment, you look at that being like, I can't even think of that right now, right? I mean, I need to, my boss or whoever it is at me to try to hit a target, and it's derailing me. You really need to push all that stuff out and focus on the client, because when you focus on the client and their needs, right? If they come in with a bad back and you solve bad back and high blood pressure, you're really you're getting two for the problem
right.
that was there, right?
Right.
So as long as you focus on the client, the other stuff will take care of itself. I promise you, it will. It may not seem it at the time, but it's so important to focus on the client and in progression of solving their needs, or even the needs that they don't know they have. Those will turn into multiple flowers for you. And that will turn into multiple business and multiple sales, right? We always focus on in the US an 80-20, and I think it's worldwide actually, 80% of your business comes from 20% of your clients. Well, that's probably because we focus all of that time on those 20% and we don't dive deep into the next 20%. And diving deep into the next 20% is important, because you lose one of those top 20, that could derail your entire practice. So it's so important to keep that bullpen, as we call it here in the US, that bullpen filled with potential A-type clients and nurturing the relationships. If you do that, it'll grow tremendous. I remember I was at a position where I had the most $1 million clients of anyone in the organization. And my boss came to me and said, you really have too many $1 million clients. You should diversify to smaller clients. Exactly. Your face is exactly how I looked at it. And I said, I don't understand. And he said, well, if you lose one of those $1 million clients, then now it could snowball. I said, okay, I see where you're coming from. What you should have said is, how do you get your $500,000 clients to $1 million clients? Not that I have too many million. It's the fact that maybe you need to take some of your $500,000 clients and move it. So a completely different conversation. But really, it changed the conversation. I was baffled at what his comment was. Right? I was trying to figure that out. But really, I interpreted it and I said, what I think you're trying to say is, how do I take that 500 or the next 20% and grow them? Well, yeah, you could do that too. I said, well, all right. Well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to get rid of my $1 million clients. I'm going to grow more of them. So sometimes the way sales managers and so forth think, it's a trickle down effect, right? They're being told, and it's really just job security. So it folds down on you. Don't get stressed by it, because you are growing the business the way you need to by knowing the client and growing the relationship and fostering more options of sales with that client.
Great points. So, I was actually going to ask you, what's the most important takeaway in your financial services career? And you pretty much gave a lot of amazing takeaways. But outside of that, is there more?
Relationships are important, and not only to clients but to peers, right? It's important to start to grow your centers of influence, right? It's important to grow. LinkedIn here in the U.S. is enormous. I'm a big proponent of utilizing that and staying in touch with people who you've worked with along the way. Those relationships are big. I mean, I'm actually having I worked for Fidelity Investments for years, and I'm having all of them. This was 25 years ago or 20 years ago, something like that. I'm having them at my house. People are flying in because they're still a big part of my career, and staying in touch with these people are important. So don't lose sight of that. Lose the people that try to derail you from your life and don't add value. You can push them to the side and kind of put them in the background, but don't lose sight of the ones that helped you get to where you are today. Finding a mentor is big. It's very hard, right? Because in our business, people are very self-absorbed. So even though they want to be a mentor, sometimes there's an underlying reason that they want to be a mentor. It's not necessarily sincere. Make sure you find a mentor that is sincere to what you're trying to do, and someone who you look up to kind of move your practice forward. There's always growth with our peers, and I think it's very important. One of the reasons why I really like the IARFC is because of that, right? It's a group of people who are peer driven, who have an ethical standard and focus on planning and value adding to clients. That's all that matters. Everything else will take care of itself.
Yeah, it's great that you mentioned, keeping in touch with your peers in the IARFC. I totally agree. I found my mentors here in the association and learned so much. But I think it's also important about, having this perspective, which reminds me, I think a president in the US mentioned this: don't ask what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And yeah, Mr. Kennedy, right? President Kennedy. So I also take that perspective and, bring it to the IARFC. I say to myself, and I've said this to a lot of people before, right? Don't ask what the association can do for you, but what you can do for the association, for your peers. So anyways, I want to talk more about your involvement with the IARFC. Could you tell us, when did you join the IARFC and why? outside of course,
Sure.
building relationships with peers.
Sure. No, no, absolutely. I joined about, I'm going to say about 4 years ago. Right. Yeah, I think it's about 4 years ago. And one of the things that drew me to them was the fact that they have, the practice management, which you can obviously tell is very important to me, right? But the other thing is their ethical standard, right? I think that's even more important than the practice management part of it. And I'm a proponent of thinking, I would love the IARFC to be the gold standard for ethics. And almost the sense of you have your CFP here in the United States, certified financial planner, and you have all your other designations, which means that you've educated yourself to be a professional and you can resolve X or Y or Z, right? You've honed your craft in a certain way, excuse me, to obtain that designation. The one that isn't out there is what is the ethical standard of it, right? Who is a better advisor in the sense of ethically, right? We have standards here in the US that you can look up and find and so forth. But I would love the fact if we could hone that skill a little more here to be able to be the ethical gold standard for clients to say, oh, I know you're a CFP, I know you're a CFA, I know you're this, that, but where do you rank at the IARFC? How are you viewed, right? Do you have the IARFC? Do you have the RFC designation? Because that means you are ethically, been reviewed, if you would. So to me, that's what brought me to the or the IARFC versus anything else, was the fact that the practice management, how do I get better in my practice? And more importantly to me was, what is my ethical standard and how am I viewed within my peers?
Definitely the ethical standard. And it's not just about the knowledge, right? At the end of the day, clients also care whether, you put them first and you act ethically, right? What's
Correct.
knowledge if you don't have the ethics?
Most
All
people
right.
can pass the test. Most people can pass the test.
Yeah, I agreed. So, as a US board director, how do you see the US chapter interfacing with the other international chapters?
I think we are on the pinnacle of a change, right? I think with Barry and Leonard being at the helm of this, I think it's really a period where we are seeing an integration of the U.S. and international chapters. I've talked about through the whole progression of this webinar about learning, right, and mentors and learning about from books and individuals and so on and so forth. Michael Jordan learned from someone, as you brought up. Tiger Woods learned from someone. So everyone, no matter where they are in the food chain, has learned from somebody. And I think whether, we can learn a ton here from advisors and other members in the US, but we can also learn an enormous amount from our international peers. I think it's just exciting to now open a door to learn more about how is it done in other areas, right? I've worked with some UK advisors before, and it's done a lot differently over there than it is here in the US. But it's very interesting to see how they're trained and what they've learned. And I've taken pieces of it and actually implemented it over here of my conversations with people, because I don't know everything, and none of us do. So it's always good to learn from somebody. I look at an individual as having like a tree, right? I'm the trunk of the tree, but there's so many branches that I've met along the way, and I have, and different leaves have fallen off and different leaves have grown back. No different than the people who kind of come into your life that have helped you grow are those people. And if it depends on what you want to grab and what you don't want to grab. But I think we have an opportunity at the IARFC is enormous. And Barry attending the graduation in the Philippines last year and on the Southeast Asia tour, that's the integration that I think is we are on the pinnacle of moving this association for, more so than any other designation in the industry.
I think it's great that you pointed out, the part about the global community. This is definitely something that is different definitely very different about the IARFC. It's not just, like the local standards or the local, what the local norms, local practices, but IARFC is truly global, right? And it's growing. And you know, every year we have different seasons in the podcast. We get to talk to different, professionals, different experts like you. I mean, if I didn't join the IARC, I wouldn't get a chance to meet you, meet Susan, meet Barry. Oh, Barry, I have to say, the man can sing because in the graduation.
I did not know that.
Yeah. you should ask Susan for
I
a
did,
copy of the video.
we will use that to our advantage, Andre. Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. So anyway, could you tell us more about this? There's an upcoming virtual summit. Could you tell us more about it? And the annual conference, and
yeah,
and the international, and are the international members welcome also?
Sure. No, the summit is another progression in building practice management. I mean, the IARFC is not a one trick pony, right? The whole idea is to come out with solutions and quarterly type events and information that help advisors grow their practice. And the summit is one that I look at as, it's global, right? We don't have to have just the US members because it's easy access too. It's really an opportunity for all the IARFC membership globally to kind of come together and learn from different speakers and sponsors and so on and so forth. So to me, that this is what I call a prequel into the annual conference that we'll have next year in April in Orlando, Florida, which I'm happy to say that, I think is growing to be, this will be one of the best. This will be a very, very impressive, an impressive conference that I think will add global dimensions to it. So last year or this year, we actually had members globally attend. And I'm hoping that, I think it was 5 or 6 of them attended. I'm hoping we see 20 to 30 this year, right, globally. I know it's not easy to get to. We did it in Disney World just in case people felt like, throwing a couple of extra days onto it to make it even better. But I think it's going to be a really signature event for the IARFC, the one that we can template and then move forward going year after year. Because to me, it's, there's so many conferences in the United States that these conferences get muddled. One of the things that's unique is our membership is very, very unique because most of these conferences are vendors or providers or whatever. But we're doing it at a really a minimal cost to the members in order to participate so we can build those relationships, as I was talking about, with our peers and then international peers. So by all means, international members are welcome. And I certainly hope that they take advantage of it because I would love to spend hours having conversations with other advisors from around the globe.
Very exciting times. I'm actually very excited for it. And also, I have to correct myself. It's the IARFC Financial Forum, right, for 2025. Correct. All right. Yep. So, I learned so much. And could you, at least before we go, could you give the dates of the Financial Forum so that our members can put that in their calendars?
Sure. Yeah, I believe it's April 23rd through the 25th of 2025. It'll be held in Orlando, Florida, and it's at the World Marriott. I believe that's the name of it. It's a Marriott. It has World and it has Marriott. So it's perfect for our global visitors, right? It's the signature stamp of the U.S. and international members. World Center Marriott, I think is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, World Center Marriott. That's definitely something to look forward to. So thank you so much, Paul. I learned so much, and I'm sure our members tonight have learned a lot. Thank you for being so generous with the wisdom and the time, of course. And of course, we also truly appreciate the efforts you've done for us, and also, organizing this upcoming events. That's something to look forward to. And of course, we also want to, Give thanks to Susan Kappa, the IARFC Public Relations Officer, for ensuring the success of this international series. All right, so thank you all. Thank you, everyone.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Paul. Susan.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Susan, without Susan, we would be zero. So I can't thank her enough for everything she's done. And Andre, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate doing this. And again, I look forward to hopefully seeing you at our conference. And thanks for the time.
All right. So I would like to remind all members on the membership renewal. Active members now receive free continuing education seminars, access to the official IARFC website, www.iarfc.org, where each member of good standing is recognized when searched by clients and prospects. Please do be reminded that we can only use the RFC designation if we are members of good standing. And of course, for your membership renewal information, please contact Ms. Arlene Baguyo at iarfcph@gmail.com, or you may contact her through her cell phone number 0917-645-7846, or you may also contact our Executive Vice President, Ms. Grace Escobar, at g.escobar@iarfc.org. That's g.escobar@iarfc.org. Or you may also contact her through her phone number 0917-157-7523. So members, please contact the IARFCPH now for your renewals. Our podcast episodes are shown every second and fourth Tuesday of the month. That is why it is important to follow us on our Facebook page. Episodes are pre-recorded and are broadcasted through Facebook Live. And, of course, on behalf of our executive producer, Ms. Grace De Vera Escobar, this is the RFC Tuesday podcast saying,
"It is better to be in the know than to be the last to know."
There you have it, folks. Thank you very much, everyone, and see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.